we are live right here with Audrey. We're going to have the interview anyways. People that don't see it, people that don't hear it, they can go up on their YouTubes and see it there. Um, as I was saying earlier, Audrey is a real vampire. Now, some of you are thinking, wait a minute, vampires aren't real. Vampires are not uh, creatures of legend, uh, but we know they are. We know that vampires can exist. We know that vampires can be here on Earth, so to speak. Um, I don't know if they are a universal type thing or creature. But my first question for Audrey tonight is how and why did you get into this field?
Well, um, as to being a vampire, I am a vampire. It's not a field you get into. But as to the other things that I do, being a counselor, a teacher, and a vampire minister, those are things I've done to reach out and help the community, vampire community in general, and just the community in general.
Okay, so what we're saying is that you now, if I understood this correctly, vampire is not only a lifestyle, but it's also a way of life as well.
Well, okay, there are different ways that people identify as a vampire. Obviously, there's role playing games where people, play the game. They become a vampire in the game,
Yes.
and those go to LRPs, live role playings, where people then act it out. Not just during the game, but at all times. Um, there are lifestylers, people who live as a vampire, who dress and act as a vampire. Oh, you are off the screen again.
Okay.
It
So
says the live video has ended.
so
Um,
what about the creature
and
that's
then,
a vampire for our listeners?
okay,
Um,
I wasn't finished yet.
okay.
There are there are living vampires, people who have a need to they are deficient in something. It's like a diabetic is deficient in the ability to process sugar. Uh, Vampires are deficient in the ability to process certain energies that they need. We cannot just get it the way everybody else does. We have to find an alternate source.
Okay, and when you say alternate source, we're actually talking about the act of drinking blood or getting blood for replacement of what is missing.
That is one way of doing it. Yes.
Okay, what is, if we can talk about the medical side of it,
Yes.
what is this function of missing, I guess you would say, proteins or vitamins or the body's need for something else?
I have actually talked with a few doctors. It's not something they can pinpoint. They say it's like an anemia, but they can't exactly tell what it is we're missing, because we can get some of it through ambient energy, like going into a crowded place, and when people have that energy that's just exuding from them, we can get a lot that way.
And
And some vampires they'll call themselves psi vampires, and they prefer to try to feed that way exclusively. And then you have sang vampires who try to get it through blood exclusively, but neither one seems to be completely fulfilling by itself.
now, when we say we're not fulfilling, we're talking an anemic like maybe a diabetic who needs
Yes,
sugar, or a person who needs their dialysis for the kidneys to be cleaned out,
yes.
or
Well, like an anemic who needs more iron or needs infusion. Some anemics actually need blood.
now how
And this
is
conversation came because I keep reading as anemic,
yes now
but
how
I'm not anemic.
now for our listeners that are probably being grossed out by this, we're talking an actual uh, uh, the body's function of taking this stuff, including energy. I do believe we all have energy. I do believe
Right.
I have some kind of a power to feed on it. Um, what then, medically, does the person do to get it? Because if we listen to legends and stories, aside from what we're going to talk about the willingness to cut yourself or the willingness to drink it from a blood bank, how
Well,
does one get this medically speaking? How do they get it?
it is done through willing donors. There's a whole community of people out there who are donors, and it is consensual. There is actual people need to make sure they've got a clean bill of health in order to do it, in order to become a donor. It's never very. It doesn't take very much, and because you are deficient, drinking your own blood doesn't do it. You can't get it from yourself when you don't have it.
And what you mean by that is you can't drink your own blood to sustain
Right,
an energy source.
right.
Now, talking on
But
the
you
energy,
can, but you can get it through red meats, and other sources that way as well.
so they're eating raw meat.
No, red meat, not raw.
Well, the raw meat would have the blood in it, I would assume, correct?
As long as it's still rare, it's okay. You don't have to have it raw. There's so many health risks with raw meat. I would never advocate eating raw meat unless it's properly prepared, and there are people who are trained to do that.
Yeah. Now, for our audience, when we're talking medically here,
Hmm.
what about the side that is the non-medical, the psychic side, the
Yeah,
astral side, or the paranormal side, if you would?
the paranormal side. I have because we are energy fear. We are very much aware of and more in tune with the energies around. I see energy more than a non vampire would. I can see it, sense it, feel it around me. So, in a paranormal sense, it's almost like that sense is heightened on high because we need the energy so we can see it, feel it, sense it.
So how? Now I'm going to go into the question that we were going to ask later on, but I think we could ask it now. How does one know that they're a vampire or turn into one? I mean, could I be one? Could a listener today be one and not know it?
Yes, matter of fact, a lot of vampires don't know it because a vampire is you are born this way, but it's like a dormant, it stays in like a dormant state. You don't know it until something starts to wake up your consciousness of it. We call that an awakening. And there are many different ways that someone can awaken. You can see vampires in movies, read it in a book, do a role playing game. You get drawn to the vampire imagery. Something there is resonating with you, something is familiar, and you get drawn to that. And the more you get drawn to that, the more you start to open up, and your nature wakes up, and you start to realize, oh, I think I understand what's going on inside of me. What is happening here?
Now, when you say an awakening, we're talking the person has a realization that something's
Yeah.
wrong and they need to solve it.
Yes, it's a dawning. It's like a dawning realization. It's a lot like people realizing they're gay.
Okay.
You
I was
know,
going to use the example of realizing you're a werewolf, but
yeah,
um,
Syrians, shifters, werewolves. Shifters is a better way to say it because there's much more than wolves out there, but werewolf is the most common image that you
yes.
see. They also have an awakening. Shifters are the same way.
So right now, I could be a vampire or one of our listeners and not know it until I see something, hear something, do something.
Yeah, yeah. You probably have a feeling like something's different, or you are drawn to certain things, drawn to imagery. Like not every vampire fan is a vampire, but a lot of vampires are vampire fans because they wake. That's how they were pulled in.
Well, I'm the Darkness made by White Wolf Publishing that
Yeah, White Wolf
started
has a lot of those games. It's great.
a however, the games don't focus on this half. They focus on the gross, murderous, I change into a vampire and I want to rule the world,
Oh yeah.
and life is great that way side of it.
Well, so many role-playing games do the same thing. I mean, they focus on the conquerors, the Genghis Khans, or what have you. That's what a lot of role-playing games do.
And for those of you that like Vampire the Masquerade, or myself, I'm an RPG collector.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody knows I collect these games. But there are some people out there who are crazy. And my next question is because we all know the story of the gentleman who they blamed Dungeons and Dragons for it, but it was actually Vampire the Masquerade.
Yeah.
And he members. He went on a
Right.
ride. He ended up committing suicide. He was actually a very mentally ill subject that needed some help very badly. Um, the game is just a 1% of the story. However, if for the people that know the games or movies, what
Yeah.
part of these things are real? Are there crazy people out there? Are there real creatures, so to speak, that can't come out in the daytime and monsters, if you will? Or is everybody kind of, they oust those out? They don't let them around, like the werewolf community. If somebody wants to change into an animal and go crazy, they kind of don't associate with them. They don't associate with you unless you kind of act normal.
Well, if there's a person who has an imbalance, a mental illness, they will fasten onto many things, anything. You know, the son of Sam believed that his neighbor's dog was giving him instructions to kill.
Well, we
You know,
I
that doesn't mean everybody living next door to a dog is crazy.
no, but
You
I
know,
have seen paranormal cases where animals have spoken and they were demons, not actual animals.
yeah,
Um,
well, but
but
when you're talking about the nature of living vampires or shifters or any kind of other form of other kin, there, the communities are coming into the communities already looking to do what they're going to do, and they're just looking for a place to channel it. So they aren't actually a member of our community. They are using our community as a convenient form to fixate their fantasy on.
now, how is that dealt with? I mean, we could be dealing with somebody like me that plays role playing games, doesn't know
Mm-hmm.
differences, and actually is a vampire.
That happens. There are. That's part of what I try to do on that one page that you see, and a lot of the other counseling I do and outreach I do is to try to get people to understand the difference between lifestylers, role players, and living vampires. Living vampires can be lifestylers. Living vampires can be role players, but not every lifestyler is a vampire. Not every role player is a living vampire. You know, it's not they are not necessarily the same thing, and the problem is a lot of role players do not realize that a living vampire and a role player aren't the same, and they try to put their role play rules on the living vampire, and you can't do that because we're not like that. We'll play the role play game because we like it, because we're
Yeah,
having fun, because but that's not what a real vampire. We usually prefer the term living vampire, but there are some people who prefer real vampire. But that's not what a real vampire is or does. There are vampires around you all the time, and you have no idea. Vampires are literally everywhere. I live in San Francisco. This city is crowded with them. New York is full. We're drawn to large cities because we need the energy. The more the concentration of people, the healthier it is for us to be. So I hope low vampire, lone place, that guy's hungry because there's nobody around.
now you said the community like the gay community. Is there a nostalgia that this is bad and evil? Or is it everybody? To me, everybody would accept a vampire. Some would think it's weird, but there might
Mm-hmm.
be a little more into it than that. like a medical prejudice or
Oh yeah.
a
Well, we cannot.
psychological.
It's not something we'll ever outgrow. I mean, if you've seen the vampire community, there
Uh,
are vampire community members who have, you know, we don't suddenly age out. If you outgrow it and it was a phase, you were not a vampire to begin with. You were role playing and lifestyling. But it's not something you outgrow. It's you're a vampire. That's just what you are. That's what you're going to be. You know. Um,
Now, for our audience, can we go into the signs? Because this fascinates me on the medical level. I was going to
mhm.
ask some questions about creatures and but just for people, just so our listeners would know, I've only seen one person fly in my entire life.
No, we
I've
don't lie.
this person just lifted off the ground and flew with no
Mhm.
help, no wires, no nothing. I saw it once in my life, and he was a Native American. Can we mention that?
Yeah.
Secondly, I have seen creatures and things that I cannot explain that might have wanted to attack me, werewolves, vampires, evil things, and not one of those things, not one of them, wanted to just drink my blood and run away.
Hmm.
Um, I've also seen things that I cannot explain, like I was a cab driver for a while, and I have seen pale skinned people kind of acting weird, like zombies, if you will. But for the community that is listening to us today
Right.
and that will listen, what are these signs that we should be aware of? Because if it is indeed a medical fact, which we know now it is,
Hmm.
I'm concerned that my listeners are going to miss it and somebody is going to suffer health wise.
You okay? If you are a vampire, um, if you know, you will notice that after a good steak or a good burger or something that's a rare red meat, you'll feel better, and you kind of have a craving for meat that way. You will also notice that if you get isolated for too long, COVID's been a great way for a lot of people to suddenly awaken. If you are isolated for too long and don't get around other people and don't get that ambient energy, you'll start to feel you can't understand why you feel tired and not well like all the time, you know? But when you get just in the company of people, you suddenly feel more than just like it's good to be around people and feel better. You feel like something has fed you. You feel better. You feel, and nutri yeah, like you've got some nutrient in that you were missing. Like, when you haven't had a nutrient that you are in need of and you suddenly get some.
Or you've been inside because of COVID, you go outside in the sun and realize it is vitamin D that actually is helping you from the
Yeah,
sun.
exactly. That's a good one. I have xeroderma pigmentosum, so the sun is an nasty thing for me, but that's
I
me.
don't know what that is, but I do believe that is
I
something that.
don't produce enough melanin to protect me from the sun. It's not albinism, but it's similar. If I go out in the sun, I burn, I get sick, which is funny because I'm a vampire.
Yeah, well, that's actually a medical diagnosis, probably before vampirism was. Um,
Actually, it came afterwards.
I meant as in far as in the medical treatment world of
Yeah,
believing stuff before,
yeah,
because a lot of these things you're discussing are
right.
stuff that I feel that I have that um, it is I guess you would call it uh, a need, like you said, for meat. Um, uh, I can't describe the feeling of the energy for people. They would just, it's kind of like going into Walmart and you actually enjoy stuff. Now, I don't like people. I have this anxiety where I can't stand people, and the stupid people
Hmm.
make it even worse. But
Right.
if I stand alone somewhere for a long time, I get weak.
Hmm.
Now,
Well,
I always thought it was
I
because I'm
understand
an
interacting
outgoing
with
person.
people. Yeah, I understand interacting with people socially can be exhausting, but going to an event where there's a lot of people around and you're not interacting with them, you're just there at the event, you know, that would be the thing that would charge you up, that would make feed you. Yeah.
Now, when we say charge or feed,
Hmm.
uh, Um, we're talking your body beginning to feel normal again. And for
Yeah.
instance, we're going to say a diabetic, we're going to say somebody that's lethargic, somebody that's had a hard day at work and has a headache. Let's use a headache, for instance.
Hmm.
When you eat the meat or you decide to do it the gross way, or you go outside and around people,
It's
that
not gross.
that headache goes away.
It's all done very, very clean and nice and neat. It's not gross. Nobody's biting anybody. Well, there are some people who have a fetish for that, but that's their thing, you know.
Well, that's
And
a
there are
whole
people who have a
nother
fetish for that
show.
who aren't vampires.
That's a whole nother show if you really want to get into
Yeah.
that stuff, because that's a whole. You live in San Francisco. The people that don't live in big cities would never understand this stuff.
Well, I come from a rural area, though. I grew up in a farm area.
That well, what I'm saying is San Francisco, I was told, has one of the 50% population of exhibitionists, if you may call them.
Yeah, I know where
And
they all
some
are
of them
too.
like walking down the street with other people on leashes and stuff, which I did see once in New York City, which was pretty weird.
No, every city's got those.
But
Every
I
city's
could
got
have
those.
them in my own city and not know it.
Yeah,
The people you meet as a cab driver, anyways.
yeah,
Um, but when we talk about the medical issue and the
right.
seriousness of this, what
Well,
happens if you don't get this?
like you said, it's like a headache's a really good analogy. But imagine that you've kind of had a low level headache a lot. And, as you're growing up, you find out when you get into gatherings or something, the headache goes down. Or when you eat, good food, it goes down, you know. The combination of the two will make it go away. When you realize you are a vampire and you start to learn how to feed yourself correctly, suddenly the headache you've had all your life goes away. So it's more than just feeling normal. It's feeling better than you've ever felt before. It's like an underlying condition has finally been addressed.
Now,
And suddenly you feel great.
how much can you do with this? I mean, myself, I'm a pretty big guy. I stand 6'3",
Yeah.
319 pounds. I could eat a whole roast,
Yeah.
but there's
But
times when
you don't need a lot of blood. If you're going to drink the blood directly, you really don't need a lot. If you and with the ambient energy, it depends on how big a crowd and how high their energy is.
now
The more the better.
how do you get the energy from people? I've been told it's in the air and it's just sucked into your soul, I guess you would call it.
You draw it in kind of like breathing.
Okay. So for the role players
And
out there, it would
a
be
lot of people will do a breathing like a breathe in. They're not actually breathing it in, but the breathing in kind of mimics it so that it's like they associate the two together. So it's like breathing in.
so for the role playing, it would be called breath drinking, where you basically breathe
Right, yeah.
in and all the energy around you just gets sucked into you.
Yeah. Well, not all of it, just what you need.
Yeah, well, in the role playing world, any energy that's in your
Yeah.
body I will take it from you.
Yeah.
Um,
Remember, everything in fiction is exaggerated. You know,
well, that's
everything
scary.
in fiction is exaggerated.
That's even scary because I know that, but the listeners might not. That's a point to make right here, that the fictional stories of vampires had to come from real something.
Yeah.
Something must have been real
Right. Absolutely.
at
The
some
same
point.
with the sisters. Everything. Right.
Well, I've seen a man turn into a leopard in front of me. It
But
was
there's
just
so much that gets exaggerated.
well,
The whole
everything is
tortured
exaggerated.
Lawrence Talbot can't help the change. That's an exaggeration.
Now, when you say your work, how does one find somebody like yourself? Before we go to a break, and we're going to fix some technical difficulties on the break, folks. So you may
Okay.
be getting in the call, but what do you do quickly, and we'll go more into it after the break. But what do you do for these people? Because I'm kind of confused on the area. I mean, you help them, but if it's a personal thing that they have to have or something,
Hmm.
well, what's done for them? What would be done for me or our listeners?
Look, the counseling I do for vampires, shifters, any form of other kin that are awakening is to help them find their way, help them understand, give them what information I have, help them find the information they need, and, answer a lot of their questions, help guide them through, point them to sources that will help give them more information. Just like any sort of counselor would do. I try to help them find their way through. It's the same with the general counseling that I do.
So what happens is they're talked to, their medical, I guess, their medical difficulties
Mm-hmm.
are addressed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where would one find these? Go into more of that after the break, but
Uh-huh.
where would one find someone?
There are always vampire groups. A lot of them are very present online. You can find a group, if you contact a group and you don't gel with them personally, find another group. There's plenty of them out there. There are those who follow different people, different authors, but there's also just general groups out there. You can probably look them up. The vampire community online, the VC online is very varied and very present. So it's pretty easy to find them.
This stuff these people friendly
It
to
depends from
this
person to
or?
person. Some of them are going to be very cautious. All of us are going to be cautious because you get a lot of crazies trying to just want to, join in and don't understand what they're trying to get into.
Now, what do you
But
do
so
with
there's a
the
lot of caution.
crazies? Now, what do you do with these crazies? I hope they're just sat down and said, hey, go back to your role playing ways and not threatened or abused in any way.
I try to explain to them and get them to understand the difference. There's a lot of people who do. There are some who just ghost them, just shut them out, just block them, go away. It depends because we're all individuals. So there is no like one personality characteristic of vampires in that way. You'll run into all kinds. It's just a basic fact.
Okay. And with that note, we're going to take a quick break. Now, remember, folks, if you're listening to us in our chat rooms, YouNow is somewhat up now. We're working on Facebook, and we
Yep.
have iBlog TV. This is where I take the time to go get a drink. I take the time to fix our technical difficulties. So, our phone number tonight is 607 238 3816. My new email is www.iambrotherwade. We changed the email, iambrotherwade.com. It's a whole new website. And you can see us, obviously, up each week as we do this live. So we'll be right back right after this. All right, we're coming off the break. That was a very small break. Now, you might not be able to hear any of the commercials in there or anything, folks, because we've docked this down for our guest. And before the break, we were talking about what vampires were and how they are in our community. Now, we're going to go now into medical signs that you're a vampire. We're going to go into what you do about it and how to contact somebody about it. So, Audrey, again, it it's almost like it's a deficiency of the body in a uh, spiritual state
Mm-hmm.
as well as the structural state.
Yes, it's a general energy deficiency, both physical and spiritual.
Now, which one is more prevalent? Because I've heard of psychic vampires, but I've never felt somebody, or maybe I can block it or whatever, try to steal energy from me.
Okay, there are two different kinds of energy feeders that have been confused together. There are vampires, and then there are what are referred to as energy leeches. Energy leeches are those that will feed indiscriminately and insatiably, and they are the ones who will attack, who will drain because they can never get enough. It's like they drink in, but there's a hole out the back and it just goes right through. So they're the ones to look out for. They're the ones when somebody warns you about psychic vampires, that's actually what they're warning you about.
And for what we're talking about is people that have trapping the energy and stealing it is somebody that has the power or the need to uh, take energy from you, drain you, sapping your energy. You feel withdrawn, you feel weak near people.
Yep.
Some people say it's a feeling of overwhelmingly anxiety and fear instantly as your body cowers. Um, and now, what you were describing is a mean act, or is this something they can't help?
They are not vampires. And they come in two categories. There are those who do not know they're doing it, and then there's those who know they're doing it. The ones who do not know drain without knowing, aren't aware they're the cause of it, and therefore do not know how to stop. The ones who either have figured it out or are doing it on purpose to begin with don't want to stop. But neither of them are vampires because they don't need it like a vampire does. They are just it's like the glutton at a table who's eaten plenty and is still just pulling all the food in for themselves. They don't they aren't vampires. They are not like us. The nature is different. The need is different. What they are doing is simply out of some sort of desperation and attack for something that this is not fulfilling.
Now, fulfilling would be taking the nourishment from you in the way of a spiritual sense.
Yeah.
Um, now,
They they need something. They're drawing energy. It's not what they need.
now, could they be taking it and wanting it because they actually need it and not know how to who stop, or one of those people that eat too much junk food and don't know when to stop, and compared to somebody like me and you who can eat a bag of chips and then say that's enough? Or is it actually just because they're malicious?
It's because what it is happening is they are not getting what they need. It's like they need something, but what they are drawing is not what they need, so it doesn't satisfy. So they keep pulling more without realizing that this is not what they need, or they're pulling more because they've learned how to do this. Vampires feed out of a need, and we can only take in so much. Once that is capped off, it's just overflow. And what happens with the overflow is we tend to comb through the energy, then sort of clean it out, see it like detangling, like carding wool. So if there's like a lot of negative energy, it doesn't hurt us because it's just energy to us. But when we let it flow through us, we take what we need and the rest just kind of flows through and gets smoothed out and is therefore no longer negative. If you have an energy leech in the room, they will leave people feeling drained. If you have a vampire walking through, a lot of people say the energy seems to elevate and feel better once they've walked through.
Now, how do we combat these energy leeches versus the vampire? uh, it, I've often felt like what you just said. However, not you know I've never felt the good side.
Mm-hmm. Well, you don't always, you can't, like I said, you could be in a room full of vampires and never know it.
Now, is the physical or the spiritual more prevalent than the meat eating or the structural ones that do it, or is it
You got to
both?
talk about vampires?
Well, for instance, if you're in a room full of vampires,
Yeah.
is there more ones that need the energy or the ones that need the food? Or is it both? They can use both.
They can always use both, but many learn to feed one way or another depending on what they first learned as they awakened.
Okay.
So they will lean more heavily toward one than the other, depending on what. And a lot of the ones who are psi vampires, don't realize what they're getting out of even just the food they're eating. But a lot of ones who are saying vampires, blood drinkers, don't realize what they're getting out of the room they're standing in.
Okay, we have a question from somebody that just wrote to us. They
Uh-huh.
want to know if a narcissist or narcissism is a form of vampire.
Nope, that's a form of an energy leech.
That's a form of an energy leech.
Right.
Okay, and I also know that people that need attention or need to be the center of everything, or they're not pleased. I forgot the psychiatric diagnosis for it. They're not vampires either. Now,
Right.
could
That is also an energy leech.
could the energy leech learn to? Is there a way to learn to use this energy like the vampires have done?
No, because they don't have the same. They're not built that way.
Okay, because I would think energy uh, assumption or what you call that, drawing
Hmm.
in or using, would the vampires would be a great teacher for them to harness the energy instead of just letting it letting it do whatever it wants to them. The ability to harness it.
But that it's like you cannot teach a cat how to better absorb vegetable matter because they are carnivores.
Yeah,
You know, they can't learn to use something that they don't have a need for. They don't have. They don't. It's like they don't have the plug-in needed for that
yeah,
because they aren't missing. They aren't down in it.
they're on it. Now, when we talk about the physical vampires, the meat eaters, or like what I'm beginning to think I am, because I can eat, a whole display case full of meat, and afterwards I
Mhm.
feel better. Um, I could for some reason. You got me worried about this. I was told I was a werewolf and I have a need to eat flesh and meat, but maybe it's
That's
another
the same.
reason.
Yes. No, the same thing with the shifters. Yes. If they are a carnivore shifter, they need meat. Yes.
Well, I've never shifted into
Werewolves,
anything.
werebears, werecats of many forms.
There's werecrows. That's where some of the gods and stuff I think came from. Is shifters like Best and the Minotaur.
Hmm.
But that's a whole another subject. Like now, do these two? Now that we're on a subject of shapeshifters, can one be the other? In other words, can a shapeshifter also be a vampire?
A shifter, no. As far as I've seen, anybody who thinks they are both, as we go along through the counseling, they usually discover, oh no, because vampires have a craving for meat and shifters have a craving for meat, it is easy to confuse the two.
Yeah,
But you often find, but I have found every time I have worked with somebody, they have always ended up going, oh, I don't have these other things that I need to be a shifter, or I don't have these other things that say vampire. I am one or the other. But it's easy to conflate two for a while until you can sort it out.
now, when we talk about the vampire's abilities, like we were talking about fantasy and role playing games, and I mentioned I've seen only one person fly in my life. Does do vampires have these abilities? Somebody's asking us right now. Or are these abilities separate from being the vampire?
Those abilities are separate from being a vampire. And a lot of that comes from the folklore of just trying to make something scary. The more scary things you can give it, like if it can fly, that's going to be more scary than if it just walks in the room, and things like that. So the folklore has a lot of like building in scary things to make it seem more of a monster. And when you talk about fictional writers, every writer uses a vampire, a zombie, whatever, as a device. They're trying to tell a story, they're trying to make an analogy with something. And so they put what they want to into the character or creature in order to tell their story.
And good Lord, there's tons of stories and there's tons of fictional and non-fictional, or whatever you want to call it, fantasy. I call it sci-fi.
Yeah.
Um, Writings of this stuff, but like you said, and like I know, our listeners may not know, but whatever is in fantasy and sci-fi, somewhere, uh, even if it's a 1% marginal, there's something, it's real, that has been based on it. For some reason,
Yeah.
somebody told the story based on something that was real. Now, another person wanted to know in our chat rooms here is being vampire evil? Now, I would like to address this first. I
Go ahead.
don't think vampires are evil. There's good and evil in anything, but what I think they're suggesting is this satanic and witchcraft and all this other element of stuff. Um, but we see in movies and we see in games, and it's one of the reasons that I was kind of drawn to the Vampire the Masquerade game, is you get
Hmm.
to play the bad side, the evil side, rather than being the good side. Now, does any of evil or misfortune play into this culture? Now, I assume there are bad people and really disgusting people out there. Um, but from what you said so far, I don't think it's evil.
No, no. But as you know, everybody's got good and bad sides. You know, there are people who are definitely not the nicest people to run across, but it's not because they're vampires; it's because they're jerks. You know, personally, um, it's not an inherently evil thing. It just is. You know.
Now, could some of now you said when we were talking that you're a practitioner of dark arts. Could any of that play into it as well, or is that separate?
Well, it's definitely they are commingled in me, but that's a lot because of a lot of things that go together on that,
Okay.
including my family background and other stuff. You know.
So for our listeners, the witchcraft and the satanicism, and that is just the kind of icing to the whole subject on the cake kind of deal. Um, the I don't. From what I'm getting for the listener, is that the evil and the witchcraft and all of that is something anybody can do. A vampire is almost like, I guess you would say, a health problem, a medical issue that some people don't know they have. Now, let's again for our listeners. What does one do when they find this out? They have this awakening, or they say, "Oh, I think I am one," or they're listening to this and, "Hey, I agree with Wade. I eat a lot of meat," or "I feel weak unless I'm in crowds." What are they to do?
Well, you can get a lot from. There are a lot of books out there on vampires, on living vampires. They're easy to find. I don't want to, endorse any particular person because I don't want people to think that I think any one of them has all the answers. But there's just a lot of research. Start reading. Read more than one. Always make sure you read more than one.
Can you recommend any?
Michelle Bellinger writes good books. Father Sebastian has quite a few out there. Those are two good places to start. Once you start looking, you will find other ones, and read more than one because not everybody has the whole story for anyone. So you need to figure out what actually works best for you.
Now, for our listeners that are just joining us, I do read their names. We have Shannon, who joins us every week. We have our Facebook audience, which I can't see right now because I am paying attention to our guest, and I apologize to them. We have George. We have Amy, who joins us in our iVlog chat room, and Dale every week. Again, if you want to be mentioned, you have to come more than 1 week. Um, what again? Um, now I'm going to ask this question because I'm curious in this. When we talk about culture and we talk about lifestyle, where did all this stuff come from? Or is it just people's ideas? I mean, do vampires, like you said, you have a problem being in a sun, so you have a different way of doing things. What what would these people deal with, or how? Um, Trying to be nice about it. Um, how would we tell that somebody is this, and maybe have some sympathy for them, rather than thinking they're odd and crazy?
Um, so you want to know about the vampires themselves, not the leeches, right?
Well, yeah, like for instance, if somebody like you doesn't want to come out in the daytime, to some people that's very weird. That's very odd. That's not right. And because they see
That's
film
why
and they
though.
see stories, they think that you're something that you're not, of course. Um, which I think movies and film and stories have a lot of bad influences on stuff. But how would we approach these people? How would we?
Well, everybody who's on a nighttime schedule is not a vampire necessarily.
No.
Just because somebody has a night cycle does not mean that there's anything wrong with them. There's people who are up early in the morning. I think they're weird. You know, I
Yeah.
work late at night, but I'm not. That everybody who works at night is not a vampire. There's a lot of people with late night schedules, so that's kind of silly. But if you think that somebody might be a vampire, uh, unless you've got any reason to socialize with them, it's not, it's not a problem. Leave them be. If they're a friend of yours, be supportive, you know?
Now, is there anything scary or unusual that we have to know about in this? Because I'm thinking of these people that used to hang out downtown at a coffee shop and play Vampire the Masquerade. The one girl actually would go around and try to attack people like she's a mad. She called herself a gangrel, which is obviously a clan or character they play. But
Hmm.
I mean, that's giving a bad name to people that may, you know.
I guarantee you, if she played a different role game, she would still attack people.
I I I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt that you're wrong.
That has
Um,
nothing to do with being a vampire. It has everything to do with she's got something she
yeah.
needs to deal with.
But if somebody's seeing these groups and seeing these types, what how would they differentiate somebody that's a vampire from somebody that's crazy?
Well, if somebody needs help, whether they're a vampire or not, they need therapy. They need some kind of help.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
if they're a vampire and they need help, it's not their being a vampire that's the problem. It's other issues. I hope everybody's starting to understand that trauma and childhood pain and things that have happened to you can cause damage and you need help to deal with these things. And that's what causes people to attack or to act out. Not whether you're a vampire or a werewolf or gay or whatever you are, it's the issues that you are dealing with internally.
Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to ask about the blood drinking types.
Okay.
Do these people, I mean, I've heard that they do consensual. I've heard that they
Yeah.
do, they make sure each other's are free of diseases. But
Yeah.
how do they do it? Do they like cut themselves with a razor like pro wrestlers? Do they actually bite each other? It's kind of weird, but I want to
That
ask.
that is very
It's
personal, and some vampires consider that very private. It's like asking somebody how they have sex
well, I'm asking
because
for
it's a very
knowledge. I'm
intimate. It's a very intimate thing. So it varies among different practitioners. Among different vampires, it varies. The most common way that I know of is take those little lancets, like people use for diabetic testing, or a very sharp scalpel, and they make just a small incision, a very small prick, a very small cut, and they just drink a little bit. And it is never at a major artery or vein, ever.
so they're not biting each other at the wrist and neck.
Oh no, 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 no. And if we do that, that's just leaving hickey.
That's just leaving a hickey. Well, that's a whole nother story. That's
Yeah,
disgusting too, but I've
yeah.
got one
Anybody
for
who
that.
does that kind of biting play, they're not biting to draw blood. That's
Well,
a
I
different
can
part of
name
it.
I can name a few local people here who would probably draw blood just for fun and do that too because they're crazy.
Yeah,
Um,
you
but
would not believe how many people have asked me to bite them.
really, I would have just gone up and bit them like on their arm and then said, "Are you thankful?" But see, and this is another thing. Humans, the undead or the non-living versus
Hmm.
the living. For those that are wondering why I haven't gotten on the weird topic, I'm trying to have respect for this topic, but now we're getting down to it.
Yep.
There's a difference between a dead person coming back to life and attacking people, being a monster, and somebody's drinking somebody's blood because they're they're weird. I
Hmm.
mean, I don't need to use the word weird in a bad way, but for our listeners,
That's fine. I can take weird. That's good.
um, to me, cutting somebody and drinking their blood is just that's eerie. That's. But on the other hand, in a role-playing game, I can take somebody slashing somebody to pieces and eating them as a monster. I, I guess I'm attracted to the violent fantasy of it all.
Oh yeah.
I always played the evil monsters. I always played a clan called Zamitsi, Nosferatu,
Hmm.
where they can grow monsters and sew stuff together and make zombies and sew the zombies together and make all kinds of Frankenstein creatures. But the realization of this is that not one so far vampire has probably ever done that. And probably the blood drinkers are probably the nurse at the hospital
Yeah.
or the cashier behind the counter at Walmart,
Hmm.
which I can probably name a few of those who are pretty weird. It might be vampires, um, but or the
You would be
paramedics showing
surprised.
up at your house. Um, so what does the vampire community do? I know you're a counselor,
Hmm.
but what for our listeners and for anybody else that may need help or want to address a certain issue, how do these people find the counseling? Because I've never heard. If I went into my counselor, because I have
Hmm.
seen a counselor for stuff, we
Yeah.
all have. We all have to have a doctor. We all. And I told them that I think I'm a vampire. He would commit me in a padded room, an extra padded room,
Well,
and
that's not a very good counselor.
probably give me a nice colored straight jacket that wasn't just plain white, and probably leave me there for a while.
Yeah.
So how
Um,
would somebody not get into a nicely decorated padded room?
well, um, they will tend to play down that. They might ask you, why do you think you're a vampire? They're not going to lock you in a padded room right away. They will try to question you. They'll try to talk you out of it, or they may talk around it and see if that quote problem resolves itself. Um, but when it comes to that, I'm not a licensed counselor in that way. I have a lot of training, but I am a spiritual counselor. Um, and what I do, I specifically help people who are awakening another kin. I don't know where you would find others like myself because I had a hard time, you know, getting people to understand what I do in the first place. I hope that there will be more like me. I hope there are more like me. I would really like, if there are, for them to contact me so that we can form a community and, share information. But, obviously I'm on Facebook, you know, I'm easy to find that way. I have an email and stuff like that.
Do you have a website for your
I have a website.
counseling
It's
place?
problematic right now. I do have a
No.
website. It is problematic right now. I'm trying to get that resolved. It's outdated and it's a problem, but it does still function. I still use it.
You can plug yourself if you want to. I don't mind that at all. If you have an email, I just would like to warn people not to write her thinking that she's going to make them immortal for the rest of their lives.
You cannot. Let's do that right now. You do not get turned. No vampire is ever turned. Now, there are people who claim that they've turned somebody, and what they've done is they've just helped. they're awakening along. They can find somebody who's awakening and they help them along, and then they'll claim they turned them. That's not true. Vampires are born, not turned. If you are not a vampire, you cannot become one. If you are a vampire, then you just need something to get that started. Some little catalyst that gets you moving that direction.
Well,
That's it.
I'm already thinking on the two things you said. If I could go into a crowded place and feel more energetic, and I do eat meat. I rare meat. I've always done it rare.
Mm-hmm.
However, I don't think I'm going to fly or
No,
turn invisible. Um,
I do not fly.
I do kind of think that sometimes I can't be seen in mirrors, but I think that's more of a mental problem than being a vampire. And
Have
by
you
the
seen
way,
us?
and by
Do
the
you have
way,
any idea how vain we are?
well, the, here's the fact of these theories. One is that if you are evil, you don't have a soul, and when you look into a mirror, it's your soul you're seeing. So that's why they couldn't be seen in a mirror. The reason they could fly is because they would sprout wings and fly.
Out.
Um, and the blood around the mouth, they used to dig up bodies, find that there's blood and fluids in the coffin, and say it's because
Yes.
they were feeding, and nail the person to their coffin. I mean, it sounds
Right.
silly, but this was before they knew rigor mortis and whatever that is, where your fluids just drain out your ears and mouth and everything else.
You turn into a bag of goo.
Well, there is a thing where the veins will release the blood inside your system if you're not, properly cared for by the undertaker,
If you're
and
not involved.
even that stuff will come out of you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
in the fingernails, blood will release itself, in the ears, in the mouth, in the nose, from your
Yeah.
head. And they used to put bodies at weird angles in the coffin. They weren't set up on purpose, like they are today.
Uh-huh.
And this stuff would spew out, and they would say, well, the person's been attacking and drinking. Now, the things that people are wondering about, like stakes through the heart, you put a stake through anybody's heart, they're going to die.
Yes.
You put a silver bullet in anybody's head, they're going to die. You burn anybody, they're going to die.
Right.
Something about shoving garlic down the person's throat, they're going to die.
I love garlic.
Well, apparently you shove it down their throat while they're sleeping, and then the vampire will have garlic and can't get up and do anything. Why? Because you just choked them to death.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
All that paper on it too. Rough.
well, there is one where you're supposed to put prayers in the person, cut the person's stomach open and put prayers in it. Well, if you cut somebody's stomach open, they're going to die of a serious infection and blood loss. It's not the prayers that are going to keep them down.
Yep.
These are silly, weird things that people did. Now, how they got into the games, how they got into the role-playing games, is the stories that came behind them, the fantasies, the books, the memoirs, if you would, the legends. And now I don't know how any of these legends were true unless they dug up somebody, put prayers in their stomach, and did that. I would hate to see if they did these things to anybody. It's like if you throw a witch in the water, if you wrap stones around the witch's legs and you throw her in the water and she sinks to the bottom, she's a witch because she'll sink because of all of her sin. If you throw anybody in the water that has stones and weighted on their legs, they will sink. It's really weird, and it's going to
Actually,
bring
the
it.
funny one about the witches is that they used to say if you threw her in the water and she floated, she was a witch. Who doesn't float?
I don't float. You throw me in the water, I'm sinking to the bottom. I'm 319 pounds. I don't swim well.
Clearly, you're a witch.
I used to stand in the deep end of the pool at high school and be like, well, what's the lesson? Because I don't know what you're trying to get me to do here. I used to walk the entire length of that pool, and by the time I got to the end, it was just, I could just bob up and down by touching the bottom. Now, I don't know. If you really throw a body in the water, does it float? I don't know. I've never seen a floating body before. And I don't
Well,
think
that's
I
why they're
want
called
to.
floaters. Dead bodies float. That's why they're called floaters.
Well, I don't wish to see one. If it comes alive and tries to attack me, then what is it?
Then it's a problem.
Well, I've heard some weird
I
stories
don't
in
care
my
what it
area.
is. Get away from it.
Well, that's always fascinated me in these movies. And something's coming at you, and you stand there, and, like in these Friday the 13th movies and stuff.
Oh yeah,
Jason's standing there with a machete, and you're gonna scream instead of running.
yeah.
Yeah. These,
Move.
and this is another thing. Movies make this stuff worse than it really is.
Yeah. Well, that's what
Um,
movies do.
well, to our listeners that are listening to this and saying a real vampire is on your show, I was laughed at by a couple people that said the vampire, she's not a vampire. And I said, I think she, one, either you live a lifestyle and that's the way it is, or there's factual stuff we're going to discuss tonight, which I already knew there was factual stuff we're going to discuss tonight. That's why we're here. But for the listening audience who doesn't realize that stuff exists,
Hmm.
now in big cities, is there
Hmm.
more? I would think there would be a few of you counselors in big cities. There's everything else for counseling. There's counselors for people that think they're My Little Pony, for God's sake.
Hmm. I think in, I hope so. I'm not sure about this, but in most vampire like clans or groups or whatever, because everybody calls themselves something differently. They call themselves covens. They call themselves clans. They will have other names so that it doesn't sound like what it is for their gathering. There are usually people in there who function as counselors who help those trying to learn, but they are often very group specific in that they help you with what that group has together or what that group believes. And the difference I have is that I try to help people just individually, you know, as they are, and help them find out their truth and not whether or not they fit in with the group or how to better fit in with the group.
Now, did you go to school for this? I mean, do you have a? You said you didn't go to, but did you go to school for this particular subject?
Yeah,
Did
not
you?
this particular subject individually, but I have taken a lot of, yeah, I've done a lot of psychology. I've done a lot of, I've also, because I'm an ordained minister, I've done a lot of that spiritual counseling training. So I have a lot of training in counseling. I have a lot of training in these things. And then just through helping people, the more I've done, the more information I gather overall, the more I can help people. So a lot of it is experience dealing with vampires and shifters and all other kin as to how to find their way. And the more you help, the more you learn, the more you can help.
Yeah, and this is the question. How? What do we tell our friends? I mean, I don't have any friends that would come to me and tell me they're vampires. Although I don't live in a, I don't think we have even a community of people that might
Hmm.
be ones. Now they could be, and that is my fear. That is my fear that these people are hiding, or they're trying to get away from it, or they don't want to be it anymore. Like you said,
Yes,
being gay or something.
exactly. There is a lot
Uh,
of that. There is a lot of
how
that.
And if they're counseling each other in their own groups, are they actually doing it right? Are they actually helping the people?
That's
Um,
a mixed bag.
I know we have a witch group or a Satanist werewolf group or whatever you want to call, whatever they want to be for this week. And
Hmm.
that group really doesn't really help anybody.
Yeah.
The reason I knew them is because I went to school with one. She went to school with me, and because they play, the role playing games. But they don't. I don't think they help each other at all. But
Again,
in the bigger cities, is it more prevalent? Do you know that
well,
there's?
you definitely have more to choose from. You know, if this group isn't
Yeah.
working or if this person is not helping, you can find somebody else and probably get more help
Now,
there. So
how
you
do you
got,
find them online? You talk to them.
thank God for the internet. Yes, you can find more people online these days. You
Yeah.
know, before you had to just stumble around and see if you could find them, hang out at the right club or hang out at the right place. A lot of times people found each other through, like you said, the role playing game, where, you know, there would be like, if you, I don't know if you noticed when you're playing the role playing games and connecting with people, there might be a side group that talks away from everybody. Those might be the
That
vampires
happened in
right there.
LARP, but they only did that because they thought they were better than everybody else, and.
Yeah, I know that too.
Well, for instance, the one girl would come to LARP and sit and read a book the whole time, then complain she was never engaged in the game.
Oh, yeah. So,
And we vampired and role played a vampire game.
mhm.
And I believe probably two of those people were real vampires, but they were of the odd level, so we
Mhm.
speak.
Well,
Um,
like I said, there are vampires everywhere, but they're not going to tell you they're vampires for several reasons, including that whole thing about protect yourself from psychic vampires, which is actually leechers. There's a huge bias against vampires in so many different groups. Even in alternative groups, there will be things against vampires. One of the places where vampires are accepted is in the Gothic community. So there you will find more vampires being openly vampires among Goths because they're accepted. They aren't judged against. They aren't biased against. They're accepted.
well, see, that's another thing is the acceptance. When I was in high school, there was a whole hallway full of people that were different. They accepted
Hmm.
me more than the other people did.
Yep.
Of course, I was in special ed classes. I was not probably the best student. I'd rather play Dungeons and Dragons than I would pay attention. But a lot of high school, I realized, were stuff I didn't need to know. I didn't need to have. Um, Now, does it affect people? I mean, I hate to find out people would try to end their lives or do something stupid because they don't fit. But does it in bigger cities where you are? Does it is it something that people are aware about, the community is aware about, the health or mental health industries are aware about, or is it still hidden? Is it still something that nobody talks about, or they only whisper to each other, so to speak?
It's a lot is still hidden. A lot of it will not be, like you said, you didn't want to bring it up to a counselor because of the negative response you were anticipating, rightfully so. So it's still hidden. We still try to take care of each other in groups. If you have a supportive group of friends, you're in a good place. But if you don't, that then there's danger. There's definitely self-harm. There's definitely suicides that happen in the vampire community
So let's
because we couldn't get them into the community. We can't get them in, or they ran with a group that were very, exclusive to themselves and didn't accept a person or had rules that the other person didn't feel comfortable following, and therefore they got ostracized. And that will push them. If they don't have another group to go to, that's going to have them spiral down further. You know.
now
So
how let's talk about how one would choose somebody to help. Because a lot of times you do approach a group, like you just said, you try to go to a
yeah,
group and they have a bunch of silly, stupid rules that don't make
yeah,
any sense. How does
right,
one find out? Or you want to prey on people? I'm sure there's people out there that like preying on the poor innocent and the goth
yeah.
community, and they might not
In
even
any
be
marginalized
gay.
group, you will find predators being drawn because they can prey on a marginalized group.
Yeah, so how does one choose safely this help,
Yeah.
this a group?
If you feel at all uncomfortable with the group, find somebody else. If you get that uncomfortable feeling, trust that and go somewhere else.
Okay.
Just look again, keep looking till you find some place where you fit. Unfortunately, that's the only answer I really have right now.
Well, I'm talking if there's a goth group or vampire group, and there's certain things to look out for, or if they are energy drinkers, like you said, and they think they like to leech off people, and they got you convinced they're like you, or because I imagine there's some people out there that are not vampires that seem to think the custom or the way is for them.
Hmm.
Which I've seen very nice people like that. I've seen very nice people who like to dress like vampires and be goth, and I've never really found, at least in my area, most of the goths stay to themselves. They're nice. They're not. mean. They're not deliberately dumb, so to speak.
No,
But you dress normally. You're not going to be sitting with them at the bus stop. They're over there on the other down, down 20 feet talking to each other. Like you said, they're in their
no.
own little world, so to speak.
Hmm.
Now, is there anything bad about being a vampire that I or a listener would have to know? So we have warning signs. We've talked about the good stuff. But is there anything bad about this?
For the vampire, personally bad for me or bad for other people around me?
Well, that too. I mean, if I'm an energy seeker and I walk into a large place, I could basically sap everybody to weakness and the whole place doesn't function. Or if I'm cutting myself and want to drink blood, I could, do some damage.
In and
Um,
of itself, being a vampire is not a harm or a problem to yourself or anyone around you, just as it is.
yeah.
However, the emotional issues that come from being ostracized, the difficulty, a lot of times people, have had trouble fitting in, so they come in with trauma, and, that is a problem. But the vampiric nature itself is not a threat to anybody, and it's not a problem for you. It's all the baggage that people have about different. That is the problem.
Now, to me, none of this stuff is different because I don't think it, but to our listeners, it may be. Um, what So what would I do if the listener or myself, I'm saying I as in, the conversation here, but the listeners
Hmm.
do if they suspect themselves as a vampire? Should we
Hmm.
eat more meat? Should we try to uh, get more energy? Should we
Right.
try to find a group and hope it's right?
Education in all fronts. Yes. One, try to get, at least make sure you're eating red meat. Make sure that you are getting into gatherings where you can just sit and take in what's around you. Start finding the books, start doing the readings, try to join a group if it doesn't work, join another group, do all of it. Because the more you do, the more information you have, the more you can find out what suits you, the happier you get.
Okay, and there's one more question in the group here.
Hmm.
Um, how can you tell that somebody's a vampire? Is there certain signs? The person's wondering because they said if they need to find someone like themselves to talk to them, or I guess what they're trying to say is if there's somebody like themselves, they want to be friends with them. How how do we tell that they're a vampire versus the normal person, or is there real no way to do it?
Vampires tend to try to not, if they don't want to be seen as a vampire, they are very good at hiding it. So you will
Okay.
probably not know. However, if you are a vampire, we do tend to sort of like sense each other. There does seem to be something that we recognize in each other, and it's very subtle. So if you think, I would just say try to gently approach and ask. I mean, the worst thing they're going to do is say no, and then you just move away from them.
So it's kind of like that old saying that somebody has gaydar. They know when they're gay if they're
Yeah,
gay.
yeah.
So
And
we're coming to the end here. I hope you've enjoyed yourself tonight. And for our rooms and stuff, I apologize if there was any technical difficulties, but I don't think anybody called this week. I have been monitoring the phone and seeing if it's able to be called. I would like to open the phones up one more time just in case people don't. I need to take another break so I can get something to drink real quick. And when we come back, I would like to start the final of this.
mhm.
Well, real quick here, another group member. How do we? How does one? They're basically, I could probably answer. They're basically asking how can they get rid of all the foolishness about vampires. And my
Education.
sense of this is find out if they're a role player, find out how they want to dress, what they want to do. But I guess there's no way to do it. The I guess the fantasy of it all has been intertwined in American history for so long that it's just something that's here and it's going to stay.
Hmm. Education. Know the difference, know how to separate, and then you can enjoy it all.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to take a quick break, folks, and we're going to go to our final half when we come right back. All right,
Okay.
folks, we're coming back from the break, and we have a caller. Caller, welcome to the program.
Hey,
Yeah.
can
Welcome.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey. Yeah, the sound's a little bit fuzzy on this side.
Okay.
Only because I guess because you're on a speakerphone.
Yeah, you're connected right into my mixer board, which goes right into the thing, which goes right into my platform to, because later we archive this on YouTube and my website. So go ahead. What's your question for our guest tonight?
That's great. So, are we talking about what they want me to? Are you want to talk about what I do? That's great.
Well, turn down whatever's I'm on, and then yeah, go ahead.
I did. I actually turned off what you're on. It's not
Okay,
even
go
on
ahead.
off my computer. So I'm a psychic medium,
Okay.
and I'm also a law of intention, a teacher, coach, which I'm doing a lot of now. It all kind of works together, the spiritual side of it. So I would say I do spiritual work, which you know. And I pick up things. And what most of my teaching is based on that and my reading. I do past life regression. What I find when I read futures is how I see people's timeline, past, present, future. Because I can see past lives, I can do that. I can also lead somebody through their own past life regression. And what I'm hearing is feedback from your side, because I have nothing on this side.
No, I don't.
Just so you know. Yeah.
I don't
And
have
so,
any.
and I know it's life. Yeah. So I'll tell people about their past, present, and future, and how I do that. What happens is people say, "What are you doing? Reading your mind, or are you making it up?" No. Okay, I can see kind of inside somebody. Let's call that like when you're born into this lifetime or in this soul, in this, as a friend of mine calls it, the meat suit. You come with certain things you want to accomplish. That's how it works. And how you accomplish them is where we get the free will idea that you choose how you do that. And what we're learning is that because we are a part of the, I call it God self, we're part of the creation because we kind of created ourselves through the image of when we were on the other side. But let's say that this lifetime I wanted to learn more humility or more about that. Once you accomplish whatever you came to, let's say practice or experience, because you can't really experience unless you're in the human body, you can't experience anything. You come here to experience certain things, be it that learning to come out of poverty, or let's say before you felt that you were more interested in money, perhaps just money for the sake of money, and you did whatever you did, so you come this lifetime and you have to learn how to, say, looking at money a certain way. And so maybe you come in a little more on the side of poverty or middle class, and lower middle class you have to struggle to make your living, where in other times maybe you didn't. Or maybe you just said, I want to come here and experience what it's like to work really hard and realize that you can create your destiny and find a way to, help others. And so when you come here and do that, you do it. Once you've accomplished that, you don't have to live any kind of karma. And this is just a really light overview on it. But when I look at somebody's past, present, future, and I try to get right where we are now, if you're getting a general reading or a reading of what's going on, I see the path you're on. So as an example, a path would work like this. If somebody called me, and this doesn't happen often or at all, but let's say a drug addict, somebody who's hooked on heroin calls me. So logically speaking, I can tell you we know where that road leads. That road leads to overdose, death. So it's probably, if I looked at the path they're on, if they're in no kind of recovery program or trying to change their life, and that would be the only reason somebody like that would call, is that they're trying to change something. So they put into this that I'm a heroin addict, I know it's killing me or I'm going to be dead, and I look at that timeline logically and psychically and say, you know what, the road you're on is going to lead all roads, well, this road at least leads to death. Now, when I'm looking at it, I also see it like a map. If you look at, a paper map for people who used to do those, or you go online on Google Maps and you see all those little roads everywhere, that's how it looks to me inside when I'm looking at you. So if I look at your road, heroin addict, straight up the thing, it goes, if you keep following this path, this straight road, you're going up, Central Avenue here, you're going to go straight to the brick wall that's going to take your life because that brick wall is the heroin addiction. But right before you get to that brick wall, suddenly in there I see a path, a road that goes off the other way, which is the road when you called me. And then I said, there's going to be, if you go up that road, if you turn here, you're going to run into a person there, not literally in this case, but let's say you have somebody's going to invite you to what I can see here. It looks like you stop at a restaurant. Now, and I'm doing this just figuratively speaking, symbolically. So the restaurant means that maybe you're going to meet somebody or get an offer from somebody to go to rehab. And this is such a basic therapy do. And the rehab, that's the right one for you because now when I'm looking at this map for you following this road based on what I'm seeing for you, I'm seeing the opportunity. It's coming in a couple days. It looks like on this little map there's a little road that goes off and you need to take that road because I'm looking at it. And the road leads you to whether it be a church group or a person at a church or something, but what I'm seeing in my side is that map is showing me a very bright light right there on that road, so you need to take that exit. And it's not an exit in this case. This case, it's just a road that goes another way instead of staying on the road you are on. And the road you're on gives you like that road map. So you follow that road map, what I can see. And maybe I see two roads going off the side of that, and the road going straight ahead. The road straight ahead leads to you crashing into the brick wall and dying on it. But that same day that you're coming towards that brick wall at a very high speed, you're coming onto these two roads. Now, if you take the other road that I see, not the straight line, the other road, that leads to maybe a few months longer, but you run into another person or the same person, because that line maybe intersects with the other one, where you get a chance for the rehab there. And you go there, and then that leads to a better outcome and a longer road that goes on for longer years than you would have on that original road you were on. So that's how my readings really work. If you're on a great road, we're going to keep going on that road if that's what you want. Now, in the reality of somebody calling me, not a heroin addict, but any person, let's say you're on a road, and anybody on a road, and you want to do something in particular. In your case, you have this radio show, so you want success, and you're leading towards success, you're getting it, you're getting followers, and you want to make money doing what you love to do, which is my most common person, is I work a lot with people who are aiming for really great things in their life, because we all can have great things in our life. So on the road you're on, what I see right now, I would, in a brief and a quick overview, because, you've been into this stuff, and you understand it, is that it's just like laying down the tarot card. So it will show me the road you're on, what covers you, what your road you're on. So your road you're on is going a certain way. You have the show. You got, even despite the sound problems today, you have succeeded in that. So that's also on your road saying, okay, you may have some stumbling blocks along the way, but you know what? You can overcome them because you knew you would. You would do it. You know in your mind that you're going to make this work, and you have other things you've done to. If the road wasn't really working that way, you change it up enough to go off on the other exit, and that exit leads to a better outcome, which it did. Because you can do this yourself, but if I were reading for you, I'd say yes. And the road you moved on to is really excellent.
Who
Yeah.
are you reading for our guest tonight, or?
Well, I'm reading more for you, Wade, just briefly, and it's just a brief little thing because I'm not doing a full one, but I'm just kind of looking at you.
Uh-huh.
Oh, am I reading for your guests tonight in general?
Yeah.
I don't know if I can hear them. That's the problem.
Well, my guest is here, and So if you don't know, she's a vampire. And we were talking about telling the difference between vampires, and we were going into groups and joining groups.
Interesting.
Are you able to hear us on your side?
What's your first name?
Uh,
What?
our
Tell
guest
me
is
what.
Audrey. Our
Audrey.
I would love to have you come on as a guest as well. Is this Angela?
Yes, this is
Yes, yes.
Audrey. Can Audrey? Can you hear me? I don't hear her.
Audrey, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, there she is. I hear her.
Yeah, I can hear her.
Audrey, as light as your voice is, because that's the way I'm hearing you right now.
Yes, I'm here. I can hear.
If I ask you a few questions, because this helps me know what I'm looking at as it goes with your past. So, am I now? I'm asking, and this is not in any way, should not be insulting in any way, but I am going to ask you: are you in your 40s?
I did not ask for. I do not wish a reading.
You don't want a reading?
I do not wish a reading.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
No.
But I was giving example to Wade anyway. So I'm giving Wade just. I'm just saying in general. That's how I read. That's how I would read.
Do you have a question for our guest?
I'm sorry.
Do you have a question for our guest?
Oh, for the vampire stuff?
Yeah.
I just think I think it's very interesting. I don't know enough about it to say that I'm any kind of expert. I've met people who are I've met vampire people. My question would be is that I know there's quite a few of them, and I knew some in New York City. Are you out of New York City? It's just my question. Is that still, or is it just there's different groups, right? That's what I wondered. Different groups. Audrey?
Is Audrey still with us?
I don't know.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Is there still?
That was hard to hear. What was the question?
She wanted to
Yes, I'm
know.
here.
She wanted to know if there's anything in New York for this kind of
Yes, of course.
stuff.
Yeah, because I've met quite a few in New York City back a few years ago, and I don't know if you knew them or knew of them, but there was a woman who was a journalist, and she got involved with some vampires here. They
New York. New York is one of our very busy place for vampires.
What's very busy? I hear that. Okay. I'm hearing it with later. I'm hearing it after. I hear it later. You know, it's
New York is a very busy place. There's quite a lot of vampires and a lot of vampire activity in New York.
Yeah, yeah. And a few years ago, and it's been a very long time. And when I say a few years, I'm thinking maybe almost 20 years since I had met a couple of them. I had a couple of friends who were vampires, and they used to go to the club where the Hudson, the meatpacking district. That was where a lot of them were meeting up. I don't know if they still do meet up over there, but that was, like I said, about 20 years ago. And I met a few of them. They were all very nice to me, by the way. Everybody was nice. That's what I know about them. And I never had any issues with them because I think, everybody does what relates to them. Is this something, though, my question is, did you know this at a young age, or is it something that you recognize as you get older? Just curious. And I missed the beginning of the show, so I didn't hear if you did talk about that.
People. It happens in the teenage years. In time, some people don't awaken until later. It can happen at any point in life.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense because I think of other things that people become awakened to as we reach puberty and start getting into understand. And we know younger, but we really can't, we really don't come to recognize it fully until we're a little bit older. So that makes sense to me. Did you know as a teen, or did you know before that or after?
I have a different background than most people. My family has,
I think
so
she's trying to
it's kind of
ask
been
the
known the whole
history.
time.
I think she's trying to ask you the history in the field and if you were a vampire at a young age, and how did it come about in your particular case. I think that's what she's trying to ask.
Yeah, just curious because I started like looking into when I was young because of my psychic gift, and I'm very young.
Yeah, I
At
just
about
answered that, but there's a delay because I can't hear her on the phone. I have to wait to hear her on Facebook.
yeah, I
Okay.
got you.
So, do you want me to repeat my answer?
Yes.
Okay, the answer is I come from a very different background. I have a very different family with a very alternative lifestyle. So, it's been a known thing my whole life.
Cool. And I can hear the Facebook in the background, so I can certainly patiently wait. Because I would say when I knew I was psychic when I was young. I didn't know what to call it because I came from my family was Christian, and they were a little scared of it. And I remember my mother got very scared when I was about 8 years old. She was used to me being able to tell the future and stuff like that. Just at 4 or 5 years old, I could say things, and I warned her about other adults. I understood if somebody was bad or good, etc. So when I was about 8 years old, because we had TV shows like Bewitched, I thought maybe I was a witch. But I'm not a Wiccan. But at that time, I didn't know what it was that I had. And then I said to her when I was 8 that I wanted to study witchcraft because I saw Bewitched. Witchcraft, and she almost crashed the car when I said it because we were driving. And I wondered if it's that kind of thing when it comes to being a vampire. Did you have to read about them? And you did say you had an alternative lifestyle, so maybe you were more open or aware of it. And would that be true of your situation? Would you have been more aware and people more open to it in your alternative lifestyle?
Well, I think earlier in the show she answered that. She said that
She had the
she
alternative.
started very young and that her lifestyle was around this to begin with.
Oh, good.
There was almost no awakening, as she calls it, for her. And what you're talking about being psychic and a witch, and that, like she said before, is that could happen. That very well could happen to you, Angela. You could be a witch and now believe you're a vampire because it was a way for you to awaken. Um,
I thought I was, yes. And I think
Well,
my
those
belief,
two things
what,
are not the same because
right.
witchcraft is a calling you are drawn to, and it does not interfere with or have anything to do with vampirism.
Oh, yes, I understand that. I would understand the difference.
but
What I do also understand, having asked that question or really put it out there as Wade was answering, I'm not a Wiccan. I'm not a witch. In a past life, I may have been, but I'm not sure about that. I am a psychic medium, and I understand that now, as through the years as I started studying and learning more about myself as I got older. I looked at witchcraft. I was a Sunday school teacher at a, Congregationalist church too. And I looked at various things, and there is certainly a lot of people in Christianity who are quite psychic and gifted, etc. And I would understand what you're saying, that they are all completely different things. Because I know Wiccans, I have Wiccans in my family, but that is different to me, different than being psychic and intuitive, etc. And what I do. because I understand how it works for me. But yes, thank you. That's important to put out because this is about who you are and what you do. And hopefully I'll watch the whole show to the beginning because I missed the beginning because I thought he wasn't going to be able to get on tonight. But very interesting. I just find it interesting. So that's what I wanted to say. And just the curiosity on that, because I hadn't really asked a lot of those questions before when I met people who were vampires. I just didn't, I don't know the history of that, you know. Now, do you, the only other question I would have on that now, do you, as a vampire, do you believe your soul is eternal? And do you believe in souls? You know, I don't, that part I may not understand. Because I believe, you know, we have a soul and that the soul carries on and it's eternal life. There's no, but do you think the body and the soul are connected in the sense of do you live an eternal life in the body you're in, or do you cross over and the soul carries on and comes back? I'm just curious if that's in that world at all. I don't know.
I think there's a delay with Facebook. I really think there is some kind of a
Well, there is.
Yes,
delay.
there is.
There is. I think
That's
it's
why I said I have to
7
listen on
Yeah.
Facebook to hear what her question is.
I got to figure that out because I have Facebook running through my thing. I just heard everything on my
Yeah.
Facebook side, but maybe.
I think it's 7 seconds, or give or take. 7 seconds, give or take.
But that's a very interesting question you asked. You asked if the soul and the person resonates with it.
In the vampire world.
In the
don't know.
vampire world, I don't believe there's any eternal vampires. I don't think immortals. I have seen people that have said to live forever. The person believes they're 150 years old, but as we all know, the body starts deteriorating mentally at about
Well,
120 years old, um, or
there's
even
one thing I always say,
sooner.
and that is never ask your vampire their age. They will always lie. But if somebody's going to tell you they're a 500-year-old vampire or they're this or that, they are probably role players who are telling you their character.
Well, I've seen
You
some
may have,
people that believe they're ancient, as in ancient, as in like they believe
But
somehow that
the more
past
what comes
live
out, the
stuff.
more in the more immortal side comes from actually having a more memory of past lives. We remember
okay,
more than most people, and that's where the immortality idea comes from.
that makes a lot of sense to me. That makes sense.
I think I just fixed this delay thing. I'll have to work on that. But thanks for your call, Angela.
You're welcome.
I look forward to maybe one day having you as a guest. I don't know if there's somebody else on the line or not. I don't know. The phone's blinking, but no one's answering the phone. So, in recap of what
One,
Angela was talking about,
that was a
I
long call.
yeah, I guess I kind of have that thing too. Is there a spiritual, uh, eternal thing to being a vampire? I think she was talking religiously, or your body on a a metaphysical level, so to speak. I think that's what she was talking about. I would think there would be. Is there something along those lines too?
Well, as with any group of people, you have a lot of people with a lot of different beliefs. You know, there is no one vampire belief. There is no one like vampire religion or anything. Everybody who comes in with their own background and their own belief system. Um, but overall, I have noticed that vampires tend to have a more knowledge of past lives, have more memory of it. Therefore, that whole idea of immortality comes from being able to remember from one to one to one. Also, the more you get involved at the energy side of it, the more you see things more in a spiritual, open spiritual sense and less in a restricted, rigid, prescribed idea of. spirituality. So, it depends on where people are in their learning process, what their beliefs are, and where they stand.
Now, yeah. Now, somebody in the chat room wanted to also ask. I'm afraid to even ask this. I already know the answer. That is silliness.
Go
But
ahead.
they were asking if this is some sexual appeal with vampires, or is it a actual need for the blood, and what I would think it would be proteins. What do they get out of blood drinking? What nourishment do they get? But I think they're more asking on the sexual side. But I'm going to turn
Yeah,
it into a
that was their
nice
first question,
question.
wasn't it? That was their first question, wasn't it?
What do they get from the blood itself? I would think two things. One, proteins of some kind to replace your own, which is actually a medical fact. It's a biological thing. And secondly, maybe the essence from spiritualness from your soul or your body itself. It's a
Yep.
living thing.
Well, remember this, and if there's only one thing to get to people that I really need to get to people is your soul is absolutely inviolate. You cannot, nothing can happen to your soul. It cannot be stolen, sold, given away, damaged by another person at all. It is you. It is what you are. It is the core of you, and that is absolute. However, spiritual energy is what comes off of that. So spiritual energy is what we feed on. Is it in the blood? Yes. Is there some micronutrients? Because as I said before, many vampires say when they get their blood tested, they read as a form of anemia, but it's not really anemic. It doesn't seem to read as exactly anemic, but it is anemic, in a sense. That's how it seems to read in a lot of the testing. They probably have to come up with better testing. It's going to take more time before they actually find out that there is something and what it is. But they're starting to waken up to it. They're starting to understand there is something there. So there is some sort of micronutrient involved. Maybe we're going to go back to the Chinese idea of qi in the system somehow. I'm not 100% sure. I don't have the medical answers all the way. I just know what I have already gotten.
Well, see, there is a medical. I forgot the name of it. I tried to research it, but I couldn't get the exact name of it. It is a deficiency in your body where you're protein deficient. By taking blood, your body somehow takes the proteins from the blood, the cells, the proteins, the things that your body needs from it. So you're replacing it with the same stuff from somebody else. It's almost like grafting skin. It's almost like those IV things they do, those silicon, whatever the plasma, the fake stuff.
Right.
However, you're taking it from real blood, and that might be what replenishes us with a blood transfusion, other than blood type change. But I think Angela's question was very unique in a way, because the psychic vampire, or the reading of other people in psychic abilities, or taking the psychic energy from people, is very unique to me, and it's the first thing I learned about vampirism, other than blood, is that there's an energy absorption, maybe is the word for it, that people can do. Now, I don't really know. You may know more about that stuff in the ways people do this. But she does live in New York City, so I think there's probably a bigger population than San Francisco would have. Although California is almost from Florida all the way up to I think it is West Virginia or Rhode Island area, if you counted every state. California is pretty big. But yeah, I don't know what to say about that for her. Psychics and vampires have always had this union together in people's heads, in other words. We know now today they have two separate things. But they've always been united together, and it's always been a skill they said vampires have, which we know it's.
Vampires who are psychics.
Yeah,
Yes.
but we also know it's because they can draw on energy, feel energy, take it,
Mhm.
and other stuff. Now, you do have a website here um, that we can give to people. It's on Facebook. If you go up to Temple of Shadows, that is a group in which you can find her at templeofshadows.org. It is also Temples of Shadows Ministry at gmail.com. They are your ways to find you.
I did post those on your Facebook
Yep.
page too.
Now, are there certain is there a certain time better to find you? And I agree with you. Mornings are not good. I have to work at 9 in the morning sometime, and I believe no one should get up before 1, and all work
Yeah.
should be done by 6. Um,
People think night owls are weird, and I'm like, how do you get up so early? You're the weirdo.
well, I don't think I'm getting up. I think I'm
No,
existing.
not you in general. Just people are like,
Yeah. Well, a
I know
lot of
people
people
down at 5 a.m.
exist.
Yeah.
And
Um.
I think it's a primal thing not to be up at night too. I
Yeah.
think that's when danger is. I think that's when but a lot of people don't realize that in big cities like New York City, I use it as a prime example. There's
Yep.
businesses that run only at night and they shut their doors in the day and you'll never see them.
Yep.
Now, is
Um.
your Temple of Shadows at night, or do you just have like an evening type schedule?
I am usually up what I always refer to as vampire hours. Usually anytime after midnight out here in California time, you know, Pacific time.
Yeah.
Um, is when I'm on live. However, if you message me or email me, I will answer when I get back. So in that sense, it's always open because I will get back to you. I take messages in any time, and I will answer when I can.
Yeah. Now, this is very unique. You probably have when you work as a counselor, it's probably very unique for the counseling agency because you can work those night owl hours that the most people don't like. But is there any struggles to that? Is there any? Although you do help people that are up at night anyways, so
Yeah, yeah. I haven't had anybody have a problem so far because most of the people who seek help are active at the same, are active late anyway.
now, what does not really quick? What does night have to do with the vampire? Because in the original Dracula, a story by Bram Stoker, he came out in the
Yeah,
daytime, and the only thing that
yes, he
killed
did.
him was he feasted on a virgin's blood.
No, the only thing that killed him in the original book, is they caught him, beheaded him, drove a Ferrari knife through his heart, and then he died.
No, but and the
That's in the original book. I can give you
yeah,
the
the
description. I
original.
guess and find the pages.
Yeah, and but in the stories of Nosferatu and TV, he feasted on virgin blood. It wasn't the sun that killed him.
No, actually, a lot of times they think that they have to have virgin blood and stuff like that. That's one of those, like, everybody's got their own idea.
Yeah.
Um, that has nothing to do with anything. I don't know. For me personally, one, yes, vampires were often active during the day, but they're supposed to be like weaker or whatever. I think that got crossed over with people like me who have a problem with sunlight being hazardous to them, and therefore we have to stay in the shadows and stay in the shade and come out at night because that's when it's safe for us. And we may get confused then with, you know. Plus, they always think all monsters live at night. There's not very many daytime monsters if you think about it.
Well, werewolves can come out in the daytime, but
Yeah, but they're supposedly in their human form then.
well, in the role playing games, we can do anything we want.
Yeah, exactly.
But a lot of the stories of monsters are because when they were made back in the medieval days, nighttime was very bad. You didn't go out at night. You couldn't see at night. You couldn't do anything at night. You couldn't. You didn't understand the world around you at night. Um,
Yep.
it was a whole nother world when these stories were first made.
And like any folklore, they tell you there's something scary out there. Mostly, a lot of times, to keep the children from wandering off. You know, I'm Scottish by background. There's a whole bunch of stories of all sorts of bogies and scary things that are out in the moors or out at night. Don't go out, because a child wandering around it alone at night is going to be in danger. So you want to scare them and make them stay in.
And there might just be something out there we don't know about. I mean, there's a
Yeah,
lot of animals
you
that
can
come out
too.
at night that have, like bats and raccoons, that you don't want to mess with. Well, I don't know. I think a raccoon would make a nice pet, but that's just me.
Raccoons are adorable. Door bats.
Yeah, wait till they get mad, though. Then the raccoon will tear your house apart and not care.
Yeah, well, my cat will tear the house apart if he gets mad.
Well, cats are just the difference between a cat is this and a dog. The dog rips a pillow apart. He'll help you all day find who did it. It'll be a great time helping you find who did it. A cat will look at you and say, "So, what are you going to do about it?" All right. Well, it's been a nice discussion, and I hope
Right?
we've helped some people. We have more guests coming up. And if anybody's wondering about Angela Teresa, we will have her as a guest on here. Don't worry.
Yeah.
But thanks for taking the time. It was early for you, I suppose, coming up.
No, it started at 5 out here. I'm good.
Oh, okay. I don't know what time it is. Well, 5?
Yeah.
It's
We have a
so,
3-hour difference.
okay. 3 hours. Yeah, 3 hours. That's right. So you're not on the Arizona time where you get to skip daylight savings time?
Oh, God, I wish. I hate daylight saving.
Well, what one did they skip? Did they skip the before or the after? Hawaii is the after. Arizona is before, I believe.
Yeah.
Hawaii also skips it.
Yeah.
And there's one
The
other
only
state
one
that
from-
does it too.
Yep.
All except for the Navajo Nation. The Navajo Nation still celebrates it. So thank you for coming up and taking the time with us.
Anytime.
I hope down the road we can talk about some of the other things you do as well, but that's going to be having to be for a whole nother show.
Absolutely. Anytime.
And I hope some people can reach out to you. And for you on the iVlog and the YouNow and the Facebook, we thank you for joining us today. We did have some technical difficulties, but I guess it was good because we got a good interview in. And I will see you guys next time.